This story is titled, After I Funded Her Business, My Girlfriend Said I'm Not Her Level When Success Came, but she overlooked that everything was registered in my name, and now I receive all the money. Hey Reddit, my name is Marcus, and I'm 30 years old. For most people looking at my life from the outside, I've been living what they'd call the dream. I have a solid career, a nice apartment, and everything appears perfect on the surface. But I need to tell you about what happened with my ex-fiancée Luna, because it's a story that still keeps me up at night sometimes. I met Luna 4 years ago during my final year of business school. At the time, I was working part-time at this smoothie bar near campus to help cover my student loans. It wasn't the most glamorous job in the world, but it paid the bills and gave me some spending money while I focused on finishing my degree. The work was simple enough: blend fruit, take orders, clean equipment, but it served its purpose during those financially tight college years. There was this girl who would come in 3 nights a week like absolute clockwork. She always carried these massive fine arts textbooks with her, the kind that looked like they weighed more than a small child. Sticky notes were poking out from every direction, creating this rainbow of colors along the edges of the pages. You could tell she was serious about whatever she was studying. Every single time, she would order the same iced coffee, and then nurse it for what seemed like hours, completely absorbed in her reading material. One particularly slow evening, after watching her make the same cup of coffee last for what had to be at least 4 hours, I finally worked up the courage to say something. "You know refills are free, right?" I asked, gesturing toward her nearly empty cup. I'd been watching this routine for weeks, and it seemed almost painful how slowly she was making that one drink last. She looked up from her textbook with genuine surprise, as if she hadn't expected anyone to actually talk to her. "Really? Even for iced coffee?" she asked, her eyes lighting up with what seemed like relief. There was something endearing about how excited she got over such a simple thing, like I'd just told her she'd won a small lottery. That's literally how our entire relationship started. It was as simple and ordinary as that. A comment about free refills at a college smoothie bar. Nothing dramatic or romantic, just 2 broke students trying to make their money stretch as far as possible. I wasn't looking for anything serious back then. My entire focus was on finishing my degree and landing a decent job after graduation. Dating was somewhere around page 3 of my priority list, well behind academics and career planning. I had a clear timeline mapped out for my life, and romance wasn't supposed to factor in until I had my professional foundation solidly established. But there was something genuinely compelling about Luna that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just that she was attractive, though she definitely was. She had this natural, no-makeup academia girl vibe that I found refreshing compared to the more high-maintenance women I'd encountered in business school. There was an authenticity to her appearance that matched her personality. She wasn't trying to impress anyone or put on an act. What really drew me in was watching her face completely transform when she talked about contemporary sculpture or some obscure artist I'd never heard of in my life. Her entire demeanor would shift from quiet and reserved to animated and passionate. She had this genuine enthusiasm for her field that was absolutely contagious. You could tell this wasn't just something she was studying to get a degree. This was her calling, her true passion, and it radiated from her when she discussed it. Our first real interaction wasn't even supposed to be a date. After my shift ended one evening, she casually asked if I wanted to check out this art exhibition that was happening downtown. I figured why not. It definitely beat going home to listen to my roommate's latest gaming marathon session, which usually involved a lot of loud cursing and energy drink consumption that lasted until the early morning hours. The exhibition turned out to be featuring some pretty avant-garde installations, the kind of art that honestly went way over my head. There were these elaborate pieces made entirely of recycled plastic, twisted and molded into shapes that were supposed to represent something profound about environmental consciousness and consumer culture. It wasn't exactly my thing. I was more of a practical, straightforward kind of guy when it came to aesthetics. But watching Luna analyze each piece was absolutely fascinating. She would explain the symbolism and artistic technique to me in a way that actually made me understand what I was looking at, even if I didn't necessarily appreciate it on the same level she did. She had this incredible ability to break down complex artistic concepts into language that made sense to someone with my business-focused mindset. I found myself completely captivated, not by the art itself, but definitely by her passion for it and her ability to share that knowledge in such an engaging way. After graduation, I managed to land a decent position as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized company. The pay was good enough to finally start feeling like a real adult, but the hours were absolutely brutal. 60 to 70-hour weeks weren't uncommon in that industry, especially when you're the new guy trying to prove yourself. I'd often find myself leaving the office well after dark, exhausted but determined to establish myself professionally. Meanwhile, Luna was grinding her way through her master's degree in fine arts. She was incredibly intelligent and had a natural artistic talent that impressed everyone around her, but she was struggling to find her specific path within the art world. The fine arts program was demanding, requiring not just creative work, but also extensive research, theory, and critique. She spent countless hours in studios, libraries, and galleries, trying to develop her unique artistic voice while meeting the academic requirements of her program. After about 18 months of dating, we decided to move in together. It felt like the natural next step in our relationship, and frankly, it made financial sense for both of us. We found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was clean, safe, and had enough space for both of us to have our own areas when we needed them. We worked out a practical arrangement for splitting expenses that reflected our different financial situations. I handled 60% of the rent since I was making more money, and I also took care of the utilities, electric, gas, internet, all those monthly bills that add up quickly. Luna covered the groceries, which she actually enjoyed doing since she liked cooking and was much better at meal planning than I was. It was a simple, straightforward arrangement that worked well for both of us and didn't create any financial stress or resentment. During this time, Luna started developing what would become her biggest dream, opening her own boutique. She had this vision of creating a unique space that would combine vintage clothing with local art pieces. "Imagine a space where fashion meets gallery culture," she would say, her eyes lighting up with excitement every time she described the concept. You could see how much this idea meant to her. It was the perfect fusion of her artistic background and her practical need to build a sustainable career. But for the longest time, it remained just talk and dreaming. She was working part-time at a museum gift shop, a job that barely paid enough to cover her half of our shared expenses. The work was related to her field and gave her some valuable experience in retail and customer service, but the pay was minimal. Most evenings, I'd come home to find her spread out at our dining table, surrounded by sketches, floor plans, merchandise displays, and marketing concepts. Luna wasn't just daydreaming about this business, she had actually done her homework. She'd created a detailed business plan that included everything from startup costs to projected revenue streams. She'd researched potential suppliers, analyzed the local market, and even identified specific locations that would work for her concept. The amount of research and planning she'd put into this idea was genuinely impressive, and it showed she was serious about making it happen. "The problem is startup capital," she would say, frustration evident in her voice as she looked at her carefully calculated numbers. "No bank is going to take me seriously without collateral or business history." She wasn't wrong about that assessment. Traditional lenders are notoriously hesitant to fund first-time entrepreneurs, especially those with degrees in fine arts rather than business. The numbers in her plan were solid, but she lacked the financial track record and assets that banks typically require for business loans. We got engaged on our 3rd anniversary during a weekend trip to the mountains. I had been planning the proposal for weeks, wanting to make it special but not overly elaborate. The setting was perfect. We were watching the sunset from this beautiful overlook, and the timing felt absolutely right. The ring wasn't massive or ostentatious, but it was quality. I had saved for months to purchase it, making sure it was something she would genuinely love and be proud to wear. When I finally asked the question, she started crying immediately. Through her tears, she kept saying it was perfect, that she couldn't have imagined a more meaningful proposal. That entire night, she couldn't stop looking at her hand, watching how the diamond caught the light from different angles. "I can't wait to build our life together," she said as we lay in bed that night. And I genuinely believed we were completely on the same page about our future and what we wanted to create together. About 6 months into our engagement, my grandmother passed away unexpectedly. We hadn't been super close. She lived across the country, and we only saw each other during major holidays. But her death still hit me harder than I had anticipated. After all the funeral expenses and legal fees were handled, she had left me approximately $85,000 in her will. It wasn't life-changing money by any means, but it certainly wasn't something to sneeze at either. My initial plan was to invest most of the inheritance in a diversified portfolio and maybe use a small portion for our wedding fund. We had already started preliminary wedding planning, and the costs were adding up quickly. But Luna had been talking more and more frequently about her boutique concept during this time. She had continued refining her business plan, creating detailed mood boards, and researching potential locations around the city. She had even drafted a comprehensive business plan that actually made genuine sense from a financial perspective. I could see how much this dream meant to her, and I was impressed by the thoroughness of her preparation. One evening, while we were reviewing our wedding budget, I made a suggestion that would change everything. "What if we used some of the inheritance to launch your boutique?" I asked, watching her reaction carefully. Her head snapped up immediately, and she stared at me in complete disbelief. "Are you serious about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why not?" I replied. "You've got the vision, the research, and the business plan. You just need the capital to make it happen. I've been looking at your numbers, and your business plan is genuinely solid. This isn't just some pipe dream. You've actually done the work." I wasn't just being nice or supportive either. Her plan actually made legitimate business sense. She had identified a genuine gap in the local market for the kind of boutique she wanted to create. The location she had in mind was in an area that was undergoing significant revitalization. Currently affordable, but clearly trending upward in terms of property values and foot traffic. Her financial projections were conservative rather than overly optimistic, which I really appreciated coming from my business background. She had even factored in a realistic timeline of operating at a loss for the first 6 months before expecting to break even. "But that's your inheritance," she protested, though I could see the excitement building in her eyes. "You were planning to invest it for our future." "This would be an investment," I replied. "An investment in us, in our future together. If this business succeeds, we both benefit from it." We spent the next several weeks working together to refine her business plan even further. I introduced her to a buddy from business school, a guy who specialized in retail startups and had helped launch several successful small businesses in the area. He offered some solid tweaks to her existing model, suggesting improvements to her inventory management system and helping her optimize her pricing strategy. It felt like we were building something together, combining her creative vision with practical business expertise. We dove deep into research, spending evenings and weekends investigating suppliers and negotiating with potential vendors. We developed a realistic timeline for the launch that accounted for everything from permit applications to staff training. The process was intensive, but exciting. We were finally turning her dream into a concrete plan with actionable steps and measurable milestones. Eventually, we found the perfect location: a small storefront in an up-and-coming neighborhood with reasonable rent and excellent foot traffic potential. The area had several other boutique shops and cafes, creating exactly the kind of artsy, trendy atmosphere that would attract Luna's target demographic. The rent was manageable, and the lease terms were favorable for a new business. In total, I fronted $68,000 to get everything started. This covered first month's rent, last month's rent, and the security deposit for the storefront. We also needed money for renovations to transform the space into the vision Luna had created. Initial inventory purchases to stock the store, website development to establish our online presence, and comprehensive branding and marketing materials to launch the business professionally. The space itself needed some work, but nothing structural or overly complicated. We were looking at new paint throughout, updated lighting to create the right ambience, and some custom shelving to display merchandise effectively. I took charge of handling the contractor negotiations and managing the renovation timeline, while Luna focused on the creative aspects like merchandise selection and store layout design. We complemented each other perfectly during this process. Her artistic vision combined with my practical execution skills. To protect both of us legally and financially, we drew up a simple but comprehensive agreement detailing my investment and expected returns. The paperwork officially made me a silent partner in the business, with clearly defined roles and responsibilities. Nothing too fancy or complicated, but it was legally binding and covered all the important bases. My name went on the lease, the major invoices, and the business registration documents. This wasn't because I didn't trust Luna. I absolutely did. But it was simply smart business practice to have everything documented properly. "This feels like overkill," she said, as we signed the partnership agreement, looking slightly uncomfortable with all the legal formalities. "Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it," I replied, trying to keep the tone light. "If everything goes according to plan, this document just collects dust in a drawer somewhere. But if we ever need to reference it, we'll be glad we took the time to do it right." I had no idea then just how crucial that piece of paper would eventually become. The day we finally got the keys to the storefront was absolutely magical. Luna was completely ecstatic, practically bouncing with excitement as we walked through the empty space. "I can't believe this is actually happening," she kept saying, spinning around in the center of the room with her arms outstretched. "I can't believe we're really doing this." I was genuinely happy watching her joy and excitement. At that moment, I truly believed we were building our future together, creating something that would benefit both of us for years to come. That was 8 months ago, and what happened next still feels surreal to me. The change in Luna wasn't something that happened overnight. It started gradually, around the time her cousin Violet moved to town. Violet was something else entirely. One of those people who had discovered social justice vocabulary without absorbing any of the actual empathy or nuance that should come with it. Everything in her world was either problematic, toxic, or gaslighting. She used words like patriarchy, the way most people use punctuation, constantly and without much thought about their actual meaning or context. Within 20 minutes of meeting Violet for the first time, I knew I was in for a challenging ride. We were having dinner at our apartment to welcome her to the city, and the conversation quickly took an uncomfortable turn. "So you're funding her business?" Violet asked, raising an eyebrow like I had just admitted to something shameful or suspicious. "We're building it together," I corrected, trying to keep my tone neutral and friendly. She said, exchanging a look with Luna that I couldn't quite read but definitely didn't like. "Just make sure you're not unintentionally creating a power imbalance in your relationship paradigm." I nearly choked on my water. "Relationship paradigm? Who actually talks like that in normal conversation?" "We're good," Luna said quickly, clearly sensing the tension building at the table. "Marcus is super supportive of everything I'm trying to do." "Support is the bare minimum, cousin," Violet replied with a dismissive wave. "Men have been controlling women through financial dependence for centuries. I'm just saying, be mindful of the dynamics at play here." I decided to let it slide at that point. Everyone has that one relative who says inappropriate things at family gatherings, right? I figured Violet was just Luna's version of that person, and I could tolerate her for Luna's sake. But Violet wasn't just a weekend visitor who would disappear after a few days. She was around constantly after that first dinner, inserting herself into every aspect of our lives. She started helping with the boutique setup and offering what she called creative direction, which mostly consisted of suggesting we paint everything millennial pink and put inspirational quotes on the walls like some kind of Instagram photo studio. She and Luna began spending more and more time together, and I could see Violet's influence growing stronger with each passing day. "We really should have an empowerment corner," Violet suggested one afternoon while we were arranging the new shelving displays. "What does that even mean?" I asked, genuinely confused by the concept. "It means merchandising with intention, Marcus," she replied, speaking to me like she was explaining basic gravity to a toddler. "Creating a safe space for marginalized communities to express themselves through consumer choices." "So, selling clothes with slogans?" I asked, trying to understand what she was actually proposing. Violet sighed dramatically, as if my question was proof of some fundamental character flaw. "This is exactly why male energy can be so limiting in creative spaces," she said. Luna, who just 6 months earlier would have rolled her eyes at this kind of pretentious nonsense, nodded thoughtfully instead. "She's got a point, Marcus," Luna said. "We should be more intentional about our brand messaging." That was the first real red flag I noticed. Luna was using "we" to refer to herself and Violet, not herself and me, the person who had actually funded this entire operation. Violet's influence became more evident and concerning with each passing day. She had this annoying habit of popping by our apartment uninvited, always with some new opportunity for Luna that sounded impressive, but was usually complete nonsense. There was always a networking event that Luna absolutely had to attend, a potential brand collaboration that would change everything, or a women in business seminar that cost $499 for the privilege of spending a day listening to Instagram influencers share their entrepreneurial journey. "It's an investment in my growth," Luna would say whenever I questioned the actual value of these expensive events. This became her standard response to any concerns I raised about the constant stream of costly opportunities that Violet kept bringing to her attention. Violet had this remarkable ability to make everything sound like a revolution rather than what it usually was, an overpriced scam specifically targeting aspiring female entrepreneurs who were hungry for success and validation. She would use phrases like financial abundance mindset and manifesting your business goddess with a completely straight face, as if these were legitimate business concepts rather than meaningless buzzwords designed to separate people from their money. You need to surround yourself with high-vibration individuals who uplift your feminine essence, Violet told Luna over brunch one Sunday morning. I was sitting right there at the table, but she was speaking as if I was completely invisible. Some people's energy just holds you back from your full potential, she continued, glancing directly at me while saying this. It wasn't subtle at all. The implication was crystal clear that I was one of those people whose energy was supposedly limiting Luna's success. Have you thought about creating affirmation cards to sell at the register? Violet continued without missing a beat. Something like, I deserve wealth because my womb wisdom demands it, or my sacred feminine energy attracts abundance. I waited for Luna to laugh at this ridiculous suggestion. She didn't. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started taking notes like Violet had just shared some profound business insight. This was the woman who used to make fun of exactly this kind of pseudo-spiritual nonsense, and now she was seriously considering selling affirmation cards about womb wisdom. That's when I realized things were really starting to change in ways I hadn't fully grasped yet. The boutique, which we had originally named Retro Perspective, Luna's clever idea that I had genuinely thought was perfect for our concept, opened to decent success. We weren't seeing overnight riches or anything dramatic, but there was steady, consistent growth that indicated we were on the right track. Luna had a naturally good eye for selecting merchandise, and she had this authentic, friendly way with customers that made them feel comfortable and welcome in the space. I kept my day job to maintain financial stability, but I helped with the business books every weekend, troubleshot any issues with the website, and managed all the tax preparation and filing. I was handling all the behind-the-scenes operational stuff that kept the business running smoothly, while Luna focused on the customer-facing aspects and creative direction. About 3 months after opening, Luna started changing in ways that were impossible to ignore. The changes began small at first, but they became increasingly noticeable as time went on. She created a separate Instagram account specifically for the boutique, which initially made perfect sense from a marketing perspective. However, that account quickly evolved into something that was more about showcasing her personal brand than actually promoting the merchandise we were selling. Her feed became filled with carefully posed photos featuring professional lighting, along with captions about manifesting abundance and female entrepreneurship. Every post looked like it had been styled by a professional photographer, with Luna positioned as the aspirational lifestyle guru rather than a small business owner trying to sell vintage clothing and local art. Luna also started dressing differently around this time. It wasn't necessarily bad, just completely different from her previous style. Everything became more curated and deliberate, as if her entire wardrobe had to match the boutique's carefully crafted aesthetic. She started wearing these chunky statement earrings that she had actually rolled her eyes at just 6 months earlier when we'd seen similar pieces in other stores. Her phone was constantly pinging with notifications throughout the day and evening. When I would ask what was going on, she would give me vague responses like, just networking or building the brand. But she was clearly spending hours each day, managing her online presence rather than focusing on the actual business operations. Luna started using words like collaborate and content creation in everyday conversation, even when we were just talking about mundane things like grocery shopping or weekend plans. Everything had to be viewed through the lens of how it might affect her personal brand or provide content opportunities for her social media presence. Our mutual friends started noticing these changes too, which was both validating and embarrassing for me. Is Luna okay? My buddy Drew asked during one of our regular poker nights. She seems really different lately. She's just busy with the boutique, I said, not wanting to admit that anything was seriously wrong or that I was concerned about her behavior. I was still hoping this was just a temporary phase that would pass once the initial excitement of opening the business wore off. Yeah, we see that on Instagram, his wife Jen replied, exchanging a meaningful look with Drew. Like, constantly. It's pretty much all she posts about anymore. I shrugged it off at the time, but the concerns kept building as Luna's behavior became increasingly difficult to ignore. Soon Luna was hanging out with an entirely new crowd of people. Other small business owners and wannabe influencers who all seemed to share the exact same aesthetic and vocabulary. These were girls who called each other boss babe, completely unironically, and posted constantly about elevating their personal brand and living their best life while selling overpriced wellness products or coaching services. One evening, I came home from work to find Luna filming herself unpacking new inventory for the boutique. She was narrating each item like she was hosting some kind of professional television shopping show, complete with dramatic lighting and multiple camera angles. "Today we're unboxing our new ethical linen collection," she announced to her phone camera with an overly enthusiastic voice I'd never heard her use before. "These pieces are sourced from empowered female artisans who are creating sustainable fashion that honors both the environment and women's economic independence." "You know," I interrupted after she finally finished recording her performance, "those empowered artisans are actually from a supplier you found on Alibaba. The minimum wage in that region is something like $3 a day. There's nothing particularly empowering or ethical about that supply chain." She glared at me with genuine irritation. "You're completely ruining my content right now," she said, as if I had committed some serious violation. "I'm just stating a basic fact," I countered. "If you're going to market something as ethical, it should actually be ethical. Otherwise, you're misleading your customers." "It's aspirational messaging," she replied, making air quotes with her fingers like she was explaining some sophisticated marketing concept. "Violet says that consumers respond much better to narrative and emotional connection than they do to dry facts and statistics." "That's literally false advertising," I pointed out. "God, why are you always trying to mansplain my business to me?" she snapped back. I stared at her, genuinely confused by this response. "Mansplain? Luna, we built this business together. Since when is offering input or expressing concerns considered mansplaining?" She rolled her eyes dramatically. "You wouldn't understand. Violet says that men are typically socialized to center themselves in women's success stories because they're conditioned to take credit for everything, even when they haven't actually contributed to the creative process. That's when I realized I wasn't actually arguing with Luna anymore. I was arguing with Violet by proxy. Luna was just repeating phrases and concepts she had heard rather than expressing her own genuine thoughts or opinions. Violet was always there on the sidelines, constantly encouraging this transformation and validating every change in Luna's behavior and mindset. "You're finally vibrating at your authentic frequency," she would tell Luna with complete seriousness, whatever the hell that was supposed to mean. These conversations were filled with meaningless spiritual buzzwords that sounded profound, but contained absolutely no substance. Meanwhile, I was becoming increasingly irrelevant in both the business and our relationship. Luna stopped asking for my input on important business decisions, even though I was technically her business partner and had funded the entire operation. She started scheduling what she called creative meetings deliberately when she knew I would be at work, ensuring that I couldn't participate in discussions about the direction of the business. Most significantly, Luna began referring to the boutique as my boutique instead of our boutique in conversations with friends and on social media. This shift in language wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate rewriting of our shared history and partnership. The business itself was also showing some concerning signs that worried me from a financial perspective. Luna, under Violet's misguided influence, had begun shifting the inventory away from what was actually working. Instead of focusing on the quality vintage pieces that had initially attracted customers and generated consistent sales, she was moving toward items with inspirational slogans and much higher markups that appealed more to social media than to actual paying customers. Sales patterns became increasingly inconsistent and unpredictable. We would see big spikes whenever Luna posted something that gained traction on social media, followed by several days of virtually nothing. This kind of feast or famine revenue stream was unsustainable for a retail business that had fixed monthly expenses to cover. We need to focus on building consistent daily revenue streams rather than just chasing social media wins, I suggested, after carefully reviewing the monthly sales numbers. The vintage denim is still our highest margin category and most reliable seller. Maybe we should feature that more prominently and get back to what was actually working. That's such outdated thinking, Luna replied dismissively, not even bothering to look at the data I had compiled. Violet's friend Monica made 6 figures in passive income last year just from her Instagram engagement and personal brand development. Monica sells weight loss tea and butt-lifting leggings to teenagers, I pointed out. That's not exactly our target market or business model. We're supposed to be selling vintage clothing and supporting local artists. You just don't understand modern marketing, she said with an exaggerated eye roll. It's all about personal brand development and authentic storytelling now. Traditional retail metrics are becoming obsolete. The boutique was gradually transforming before my eyes from the carefully curated vintage and art concept we had originally planned into what looked like every other generic Instagram bait shop. The walls were now covered with neon signs, featuring generic inspirational quotes that you could find in any basic home goods store. We were selling overpriced candles with names like Feminist Rage and Patriarchy Tears that cost us $8 to source, and we were selling for $35 because they had empowering slogans screen printed on them. We had racks full of wholesale items that Luna was marking up 400% simply because they had vaguely feminist or empowering messages printed on them. The quality vintage pieces that had originally defined our brand were being pushed to the back of the store to make room for mass-produced merchandise that had no connection to our original vision. Our customers started noticing these changes too, and their feedback reflected their disappointment. Online reviews began mentioning the shifting focus away from what had made the boutique special in the first place. Several longtime patrons who had been regular customers since our opening expressed genuine disappointment about the new direction we were taking. Luna dismissed all of this negative feedback as negative energy that she didn't need in her life, rather than treating it as valuable information about what our customers actually wanted from our business. Around this time, a local women's business collective had approached us about a potentially valuable partnership opportunity. They wanted to feature some of our vintage pieces in their upcoming networking event, which would have been excellent exposure for the boutique. This was exactly the kind of partnership that aligned perfectly with our original concept and would have introduced us to precisely the type of customers we had been targeting from the beginning. "I turned them down," Luna announced casually over dinner one evening, as if she was mentioning something completely insignificant. "What? Why would you do that?" I asked, genuinely shocked. "That was a perfect opportunity for us. It would have been great exposure and exactly the right demographic." She shrugged with complete indifference. Violet looked into their founder and did some research. Apparently, she once liked a tweet that was problematic about cultural appropriation in fashion. We can't align our brand with that kind of toxicity. Did you at least verify this information before turning down what could have been a valuable business partnership? I asked, trying to keep my frustration under control. "I don't need to verify someone's lived experience, Marcus," she replied coldly, using the kind of language that had become standard in her vocabulary. Violet's intuition about people is usually spot on when it comes to identifying problematic individuals. I was watching Luna disappear before my eyes, not just as my romantic partner, but as a business partner with any semblance of common sense or practical judgment. I finally decided to confront her directly about what was happening between us. "I feel like you're deliberately cutting me out," I said one evening when we were both home. "Out of the business decisions, and out of us as a couple." "You're being completely paranoid," she replied, without even bothering to look up from her phone screen. "I'm just growing the brand and focusing on expansion. It's all marketing, Marcus. You wouldn't understand the creative side of what I'm doing. I should have recognized what was coming, but I let it go and hoped things would somehow improve on their own." It was a Thursday evening when everything completely imploded. I came home from work to find Luna sitting at our kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with an expression I couldn't quite read. She had been at another networking brunch with Violet and their new crowd of entrepreneurial wannabes. "We need to talk," she said finally, looking up from her phone with a serious expression. Those 4 words that never, ever precede anything good in a relationship. I noticed immediately that she had taken off her engagement ring. It was sitting on the table between us like a dead canary in a coal mine, and my stomach dropped when I saw it there. "I think I've outgrown this relationship," she continued, and her voice had this oddly rehearsed quality, like she had been practicing this speech. "I'm in a different place now, vibrating at a higher frequency. I need someone who matches my energy and truly understands my journey of personal and professional growth." I stared at her, trying to recognize the woman I had asked to marry me just over a year ago. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed. "Is this about the boutique? Because if you're feeling pressure or stress about the business, we can work through that together." "Not everything is about the boutique, Marcus," she cut me off sharply. "This is about emotional and spiritual growth. You wouldn't get it." "Try me," I said, my voice getting harder as I realized how serious this conversation was becoming. She sighed like I was a child struggling with basic mathematics. "I need to align myself with someone who's actually at my level. Someone who understands real ambition and vision for the future. You're just comfortable. And I'm not meant for comfortable. I'm meant for so much more than this." "Comfortable?" I repeated, hardly believing what I was hearing. "You mean the comfort of me bankrolling your entire business venture? That kind of comfortable?" "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about," she said, throwing her hands up in exasperation. You always reduce everything to financials and spreadsheets. There's more to life than money, Marcus. There's also more to life than Instagram filters and meaningless buzzwords, I shot back. But here we are. Luna stood up from the table abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Violet was absolutely right about you, she said, grabbing her purse with decisive movements. Violet? I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The girl who calls herself a feminist while sponging off her parents at 32 years old? That's who you're taking life advice from now? At least she supports my dreams and aspirations, Luna shot back angrily, instead of trying to control them with money and guilt trips. Control them? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I funded them. I made your dream possible when no one else would take the risk. And you've never let me forget it for a single day, she said, slinging her purse over her shoulder. I'm staying at Violet's apartment for a while. I need space to recenter my energy and figure out my next steps without your constant negativity. What about the ring? I asked, nodding toward the diamond that was still sitting on the table between us. She paused for a moment, then shrugged with complete indifference. Keep it. It was never really my style anyway. And with that casual dismissal of everything we had built together, she walked out the door. I sat there for a very long time, staring at that ring and trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't just about our relationship ending. People break up all the time, and relationships don't always work out. This was about watching someone I genuinely loved transform into someone I barely recognized. Someone who could completely rewrite our entire shared history to fit a narrative that made her the hero and me the villain in her story. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a text message from Drew. Just saw Luna's Instagram story. You okay, man? I hadn't even thought to check social media after everything that had happened. I opened Instagram to find that Luna had already posted a selfie of herself, looking wistfully out the window of Violet's apartment. The caption read, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what no longer serves your highest purpose. #self-love #new beginnings." Violet had already commented, "So proud of you for choosing yourself, Queen. Men will always try to clip your wings when you're ready to soar." 27 people had liked the post already, including several of our mutual friends who had no idea what had actually happened behind the scenes. I closed the app and poured myself a glass of water, realizing that this situation was about to get much more complicated and messy than just a simple breakup. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Luna had posted a series of Instagram stories overnight, along with a main grid post that made my blood absolutely boil when I read it. The caption read, "Leveling up means letting go. So grateful for this journey of self-discovery and entrepreneurship. Built this business from nothing but a dream and pure determination. No one believed in me, but here I am. Living proof that women don't need a man to succeed. #self, made entrepreneur, #bossbabe, #trust the process." The photos showed her posing in the boutique, artfully arranged among the merchandise, and looking wistfully out the front window like she was posing for some kind of magazine spread about successful female entrepreneurs. Comments were pouring in from her new crowd of supporters. "So proud of you, girl. This is what independence looks like. Yes, Queen. Know your worth." Violet had commented as well. "This is what happens when you stop letting toxic masculinity limit your potential. Your energy is so much brighter now." I stared at my phone in complete disbelief. Self-made? What did that even mean when I had literally written the checks for every single item in that store? I tried calling Luna to ask what the hell was going on, but there was no answer. I sent her a text message asking for an explanation about the social media posts, but I received no response whatsoever. She was clearly ignoring my attempts at communication while simultaneously crafting this false narrative about our relationship and business partnership. Over the next few days, the situation got progressively worse. More posts appeared. More stories were shared, all continuing to imply that she had built this business through sheer force of will and determination. There were vague references to overcoming obstacles and breaking free from negativity that never mentioned me by name. But the implication was crystal clear. I had been the one holding her back from achieving her full potential. Then a mutual friend, Nate, sent me some screenshots that made my stomach drop. These were from a private Instagram story that Luna had posted, one that I had been deliberately excluded from seeing. "Reminder that financial abuse is still abuse," the text overlay read. "Just because it doesn't leave bruises doesn't mean it isn't violence. So thankful to be reclaiming my power and independence." Nate's message accompanying the screenshots read, "Dude, what the actual hell? This is completely crazy. You need to see what she's saying about you. He followed up with additional screenshots from a group chat where Luna and Violet were actively discussing me and our relationship. Violet had written, "Classic narcissist playbook. He funded the business specifically to keep you dependent on him. Financial prison is still prison, and you're finally free." Luna had replied with a series of clapping hand emojis, clearly agreeing with this completely false characterization of our relationship and business partnership. Another message from Luna in the same conversation read, "He literally tried to veto my business decisions because he thought he knew better. Always told me I was making poor choices because I was following my intuition instead of his precious spreadsheets and data analysis." The conversation continued with Violet suggesting that Luna should consider speaking with an advocate who specializes in domestic abuse, because what I had supposedly done sounded like it could qualify as economic abuse according to some definition she had found online. Nate added another message. "Just so you know, I called complete BS on this entire narrative. I told them I've known you for years, and this doesn't sound anything like the Marcus I know." They removed me from the group chat immediately after that. Then our mutual friends started acting weird and distant. Some stopped responding to my text messages entirely, while others sent awkward hang-in-there messages without providing any specifics about what they had heard. A couple of friends flat out asked me directly if what Luna was saying about our relationship was actually true. "What exactly is she saying about me?" I asked Drew over drinks at our usual bar. He was one of the only friends who had agreed to meet with me face-to-face rather than just avoiding the entire situation. He looked genuinely uncomfortable and took a long sip of his beer before answering. "Dude, it's really messed up. She's telling people that you were financially controlling throughout your entire relationship, that you tried to take credit for her business ideas and creativity, that you got jealous of her success and threatened to pull funding if she didn't stay in her place. Some really toxic boyfriend stuff that honestly doesn't sound like you at all." I set my drink down carefully, trying to stay calm and process this information. "And people actually believe this version of events?" "Some do," he admitted reluctantly. "You know how it is on social media. Everyone loves a good villain story, and Violet's been backing her up the entire time, adding all kinds of specific details that make it sound more credible." "Like what kind of details?" I asked. "Like that you made her ask permission before spending her own money. That you deliberately sabotaged business connections because you were insecure about her success. That you monitored her social media and tried to control who she could be friends with. That kind of controlling behavior. That's literally the complete opposite of what actually happened," I said, genuinely baffled by how thoroughly she had twisted our history. "I encouraged her to pursue business connections and networking opportunities. I fronted the capital specifically so she could make her dream happen without financial stress." "I know, man, but look at it from the outside perspective," Drew said sympathetically. "She's posting all this empowerment content daily, building this narrative about overcoming adversity and toxic relationships. You're saying absolutely nothing in response. In the social media court of public opinion, silence looks like guilt. I had been staying silent, thinking this whole situation would eventually blow over and people would move on to the next drama. Clearly, that strategy wasn't working at all, and I was realizing I needed to change my approach. Meanwhile, my phone started buzzing with an incoming call from an unknown number while I was still at the bar with Drew. I excused myself and stepped outside to answer it. "Marcus, this is Robert," the voice said. "Luna's father." That was completely unexpected. I had always gotten along really well with Luna's parents throughout our relationship. They were pragmatic, down-to-earth people who seemed nothing like what their daughter had become lately. "I owe you a sincere apology," he continued, his voice heavy with what sounded like genuine distress. "I've seen what Luna's been posting on social media, and I know it's not true. We raised her better than this kind of behavior." "I really appreciate that, Robert," I said, surprised by the call but grateful for the support. "Her mother and I have been absolutely devastated," he continued. "Not just about the breakup itself, but about how she's been behaving and the things she's been saying. You were honestly the best thing that ever happened to her, and I'm just ashamed of how she's treating you now. You don't need to apologize for her actions," I told him, though I was touched by his concern. "Maybe not, but someone in this family should," he replied. "We've tried talking to her, but she refuses to listen to us. She says we're trapped in outdated relationship paradigms, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean." "Violet has really filled her head with a lot of nonsense," I said. We talked for a few more minutes, and he sounded genuinely distraught. I could tell he was caught between wanting to defend his daughter and acknowledging her terrible behavior toward me. "Just one more thing," he said, before we hung up. Her mother specifically wanted me to tell you this. She hopes you'll block Luna on everything: social media, phone, email, everything. For everyone's sake, this situation is only going to get worse before it gets better. He wasn't wrong about that prediction. That night, I pulled out all the documentation I had kept from the business setup. Business registration documents, bank statements, invoices for all the inventory purchases, the original lease agreement, contractor bills for the renovations, canceled checks, and most importantly, the original partnership agreement we had both signed. Everything had my name on it. Everything had my signature, and everything had been paid from my personal accounts. I called a lawyer first thing the next morning. "You're actually in a much better position than most people in this kind of situation," he told me, after carefully reviewing all the documents. "Your name is on nearly everything that matters. The business registration lists you as a partner with significant ownership stakes. The lease has you listed as the primary leaseholder. She can't just cut you out of the business because your romantic relationship ended." "What are my legal options?" I asked. "You have several," he explained. "We could force a sale of the business and split the assets according to your partnership agreement. You could buy her out of her share. She could theoretically buy you out, though, given the circumstances and her financial situation, that seems highly unlikely. Or you could assert your rights as the majority partner and take control of daily operations." I thought about it for a moment. "Let's start with a formal letter. Something that legally outlines my rights and documents my financial investments. Let's see how she responds to that before we escalate further." The lawyer nodded in agreement. Sometimes that's all it takes to resolve these situations. It wasn't nearly that simple. Luna responded to our legal letter through her own attorney. Some guy that Violet knew, who apparently specialized in what he called feminist jurisprudence. Whatever the hell that was supposed to mean. His response letter basically accused me of trying to steal a woman's business and implied that I was using patriarchal financial systems to control and manipulate Luna. My lawyer actually laughed out loud when he read their response. "This isn't a legal argument," he said, shaking his head. "This reads like a Twitter thread. There's no actual legal substance here." We decided to escalate the situation. We filed a formal complaint with detailed documentation of my entire financial investment, along with a request for injunctive relief to prevent her from making major business decisions without my legal consent as a partner. Meanwhile, Luna's social media campaign continued relentlessly. The boutique's Instagram account became a daily chronicle of female empowerment platitudes and increasingly vague references to men who can't handle strong women. Violet featured heavily in the comment section of every post, always validating Luna's truth and encouraging her to stay strong against the toxic masculinity she was supposedly facing. But I noticed something particularly interesting happening behind all the social media drama and legal posturing. While the online support for Luna remained strong with plenty of likes and encouraging comments, the boutique itself was actually suffering from serious operational problems. Sales were declining consistently, inventory wasn't moving at the rate it needed to, and the financial books, which I still had access to through our shared cloud-based accounting software, showed mounting expenses alongside dwindling income. It was becoming clear that running an actual business was much more complicated than posting inspirational content about running a business. The worst part was watching the poor business decisions happen in real time while being powerless to intervene. Luna had ordered a massive shipment of graphic t-shirts with slogans like, "The future is female," and "Smash the patriarchy." Expensive custom merchandise that simply wasn't selling to our actual customer base. Meanwhile, the vintage denim that had been one of our most reliable sellers was being pushed to the back of the store to make room for what Violet called the empowerment section. Luna had also hired a social media consultant, another friend of Violet's, at $75 per hour to supposedly boost their online presence and engagement. But while the uptick in likes and comments looked impressive on paper, it wasn't translating into any actual sales or revenue for the business. This consultant had also convinced Luna to invest in an elaborate professional photo shoot for their spring collection, which cost nearly $3,000 but generated exactly zero additional revenue. It was all about creating content for social media rather than actually selling products to customers. A quick analysis of our point-of-sale data showed that our customer retention rate was absolutely plummeting. People weren't coming back for repeat purchases after their first visit anymore, which is devastating for any retail business that depends on building a loyal customer base. The online reviews told the real story of what was happening in the store. Customers were complaining about being lectured on feminism and social justice while they were just trying to shop for clothing. Others mentioned feeling pressured to take Instagram photos with merchandise instead of actually being helped with their purchases. One particularly damning review that really stuck with me read, "Went in looking for vintage jeans and got trapped in a 20-minute conversation about decolonizing my fashion choices instead." The staff seemed more interested in converting me to their ideology than helping me find what I needed. Just sell clothes, please. It turns out that actually running a successful business is significantly harder when you're more focused on performing the role of a business owner on social media than you are on the fundamental basics of retail operations, customer service, and inventory management. 2 months into our legal standoff, my lawyer called with some unexpected news. "She wants to meet," he said. "No lawyers present, just the two of you. She says she wants to resolve this situation amicably." I was highly skeptical of her motives, but I agreed to the meeting anyway. We arranged to meet at a neutral coffee shop across town, somewhere neither of us had any personal history or emotional attachment to. When Luna arrived, she looked noticeably different from her carefully curated social media appearance. The polished aesthetic was still there, but it was clearly fraying around the edges. There were darker circles under her eyes, her hair wasn't quite as perfectly styled as usual, and she seemed genuinely tired in a way that no amount of professional photography could hide. "Thanks for agreeing to meet me," she said as she slid into the booth across from me. "What do you want, Luna?" I asked directly, not interested in small talk or pretending this was a friendly social visit. She took a deep breath before answering. "The boutique is really struggling financially. I need more capital to keep it running." I stared at her, waiting for her to continue and explain what she was actually asking for. "I thought maybe you'd be willing to invest again," she continued, her voice becoming smaller. "For old time's sake, you know?" I couldn't help myself. I laughed right in her face. "So, after everything you've said about me online, after trying to completely erase my contribution to the business and turning our mutual friends against me, you want more money?" "I'm genuinely impressed by the audacity," I continued. "That takes some serious nerve." "People say things when they're hurt and emotional," she mumbled, looking down at the table instead of meeting my eyes. "It wasn't meant to be personal." "Wasn't personal?" I repeated, hardly believing what I was hearing. "You've been dragging my reputation through the mud for months on social media. You've been telling people I was financially abusive and controlling. How is that not personal?" "That's just social media," she shrugged dismissively. "It's not real life. People understand that." "Tell that to my parents, who've been getting concerned phone calls from relatives asking if everything is okay," I said, my voice getting harder. "Or tell that to my boss, who pulled me aside to ask if everything was all right at home because he'd heard some concerning rumors." It felt pretty damn real to all of us. She looked down again, clearly uncomfortable with being confronted about the real-world consequences of her online behavior. "I'm sorry if that happened," she said quietly, "but I really need help right now. The boutique is everything to me." "That's funny," I replied. "I thought I was everything to you once upon a time." "Things change," she said simply. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally, looking up with what seemed like genuine desperation. "Do you want to shut the business down completely? To ruin something I've worked so hard for?" "You mean something I paid for," I corrected her. "Something that you've been pretending you built entirely by yourself." She had no answer for that obvious truth. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, leaning forward and speaking clearly so there would be no misunderstanding. "You have exactly 2 options, and these are the only choices you're going to get. Option 1, we list the business for sale immediately. We pay off any remaining debts and obligations, and then we split whatever money is left over based on our original partnership agreement, which heavily favors me since I put up all the startup capital. Option 2, you publicly set the record straight about who actually funded this business from the beginning. You buy out my ownership share over time with reasonable interest, and you completely stop dragging my name through the mud on social media or anywhere else." "I can't afford to buy you out," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then I guess it's option 1, I said matter-of-factly. "We shut it down and liquidate everything." She looked genuinely panicked at this prospect. "You'd really shut down the entire business after everything we've been through?" "After everything?" I laughed again. "Yes, Luna, especially after everything. You made your choice when you decided to rewrite history and vilify me publicly. The next day, Luna's entire social media presence went completely quiet. No posts, no stories, no comments on other people's content. Complete radio silence for the first time in months. 3 days later, the boutique's Instagram account posted a simple black square with white text that read, Statement from Retro Perspective. Below that, in smaller text, in the interest of transparency and honesty, I need to clarify some previous statements I have made. This business was made possible through significant financial investment from my former partner Marcus. Previous claims suggesting I built this business entirely alone were incorrect and misleading. I sincerely apologize for any misconceptions I may have created. It wasn't exactly a full confession or acknowledgement of everything she had done, but it was at least something. I later found out that my lawyer had actually helped draft that statement as part of our settlement negotiations. The terms of our final settlement were straightforward and legally binding. The boutique would continue operating as a business, with Luna remaining as the public face and day-to-day manager. However, I would maintain 51% ownership and final decision-making authority, though I would stay completely behind the scenes. Luna would make monthly payments to gradually buy out my ownership share over 5 years with reasonable interest. Most importantly, she would immediately stop all negative references to me, whether direct or implied, on social media or in any other public forum. The comments on her apology post were absolutely fascinating to read. There was confusion, lots of questions that went unanswered, some continued support from her core followers, but mostly just awkward silence. The engagement was a fraction of what her previous posts had received. Most notably, Violet didn't comment at all on the apology post, which was very telling considering how vocal she had been throughout this entire situation. In fact, Violet had her own serious problems to deal with around this time. Someone, and it definitely wasn't me, had compiled a comprehensive collection of screenshots featuring Violet's most problematic social media takes over the years. This collection included racist hot takes, culturally appropriative Halloween costumes, tweets mocking survivors of various tragedies, and basically the standard influencer cancellation package that exposed her hypocrisy. The compilation circulated widely within their social circle, effectively puncturing her self-appointed position as the arbiter of progressive values and social justice. It was a devastating blow to someone who had built her entire online persona around calling out other people's problematic behavior. Later, I found out it was actually Nate who had put together what became known as the Violet Exposé. That girl had it coming for a long time, he told me over lunch several weeks later. She's been playing social justice warrior and lecturing everyone about their moral failings while having some of the most toxic takes I've ever seen. The hypocrisy was just too much to ignore. The collection included some truly spectacular gems that completely destroyed her credibility. There were photos of Violet mocking indigenous practices while wearing a Native American headdress at Coachella. There were tweets where she joked about serious mental health conditions and made light of people's genuine struggles. There was a particularly damning blog post where she had written that poor people just need to manifest wealth consciousness and stop making excuses for their financial situations, all while living rent-free in her parents' downtown condo. The final blow came from a series of private DMs between Violet and a follower who had respectfully questioned one of her takes on feminism. Violet had responded with an absolutely vicious tirade of personal insults, culminating with, "Maybe if you spent less time criticizing successful women and more time working on yourself, you wouldn't be so broke and bitter." Not exactly the solidarity and sisterhood she had been preaching about in her public posts. The fallout from this exposé was swift and merciless. Violet's carefully curated image as a progressive thought leader crumbled overnight. The very community she had been preaching to turned on her with the same ruthless cancel culture tactics she had wielded against others. Her follower count plummeted dramatically, and several brand partnerships she had been bragging about suddenly decided to go in a different direction. Most tellingly, she blocked Luna almost immediately when the controversy started heating up. When things got difficult, Violet threw Luna under the bus without a second thought. Shocking, I know. Drew sent me screenshots from a group chat where people were discussing the Violet situation. Someone had asked if Violet was still working with Luna at the boutique. Violet's response was ice cold. "I don't associate with businesses built on dishonesty. I was misled about the true nature of Retro Perspective's funding structure, and I cannot in good conscience continue that relationship." Just like that, she had rewritten history yet again. Now she was positioning herself as the victim who had been deceived by Luna, rather than the architect of this entire mess. She was no longer the empowerment guru who had encouraged Luna to embrace her independence. Now she was just another innocent bystander who had been fooled. The guy Luna had been seeing on the side, some trust fund art collector she had met through the boutique's networking events, also ghosted her completely once he realized she wasn't actually the independent, self-made business mogul she had presented herself as. It turns out he had been looking for a power couple situation where both partners brought equal success and resources to the table, not a bailout opportunity where he'd be expected to fund someone else's failing business. One of our mutual friends, Freya, reached out to me about a month after everything had settled down. "I owe you a genuine apology," she said when we met for coffee. "I believed Luna's version of events without ever bothering to ask for your side of the story. That wasn't fair to you. What changed your mind?" I asked, curious about what had finally made her see through Luna's narrative. "I saw her in action at a networking event last week," Freya explained. She was telling some new guy about how she had started her business from nothing but a dream and pure determination. It was almost word for word what she had posted online about being self-made. When someone casually mentioned your name in the context of the business, she acted like you were just some bitter ex-boyfriend who tried to take credit for her success after the fact. I knew that wasn't true, because I remember when you guys were planning everything together from the very beginning. Freya wasn't the only one who came around. Gradually, friends who had gone silent during the worst of the drama started reaching back out. Some offered direct apologies for believing Luna's version without question, while others just quietly resumed contact like nothing had ever happened. I didn't hold grudges against any of them. Most people naturally avoid drama by instinct, and I understood why they had chosen to stay out of it initially. With Violet completely out of the picture and the trust fund boyfriend having vanished, Luna's carefully constructed new life began to crumble around her. Most of the boss babe crowd she had been surrounding herself with quickly moved on to the next inspirational story or drama. In the world of social media influence and performative entrepreneurship, she had become old news almost overnight. The last I heard through the grapevine, Luna was staying on some photographer's couch. Probably someone she had met through her networking events who was willing to provide temporary housing in exchange for social media content or some other arrangement. She was still managing the boutique on a day-to-day basis, but with considerably less social media fanfare and self-promotion than before. There was a certain satisfaction in watching the boutique gradually return to its original concept and vision over the following months. The so-called empowerment corner quietly disappeared, and the vintage pieces that had originally defined our brand migrated back to the front displays where they belonged. Sales slowly but steadily recovered as Luna refocused on actually running the business rather than performing the role of running a business for social media content. I ran into Luna's parents at a restaurant downtown about 6 months after everything had finally settled down. Her mother immediately hugged me tightly, with tears forming in her eyes. "I'm so incredibly sorry about all of this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We raised her to be better than this kind of behavior, I swear." "It's really not your fault," I assured her, meaning it sincerely. "You can't control the choices your adult children make." "How is she doing?" I asked, more out of politeness than any genuine concern for Luna's well-being. "Humbled," her mother replied with a mixture of sadness and relief. "She's finally back in reality now that her cousin has moved on to her next victim." They asked about me, how my work was going, whether I was seeing anyone new, the kind of normal, polite conversation that carefully avoided the massive elephant in the room. That elephant being the fact that their daughter had tried to systematically erase me from a business I had funded and had deliberately smeared my reputation in the process. As for me personally, I decided to take all the monthly payments Luna was making and channel them directly into a small business investment fund that I created specifically for actual self-made entrepreneurs. People who were genuinely building something from scratch without trying to rewrite history or manipulate others into funding their dreams. I also created an anonymous scholarship fund specifically for business students who were focusing on retail innovation and sustainable business practices. It felt like a positive way to use the money that was coming from this whole mess to actually help people who were serious about building legitimate businesses. The boutique itself continues to operate and is actually doing reasonably well now that Luna has started focusing on the fundamentals of running it properly, instead of just posting about it constantly. Better sales numbers, improved customer retention, and a return to the quality merchandise that had originally attracted customers in the first place. I stay completely hands-off from any operational decisions, exactly as our legal agreement specifies. My lawyer handles any necessary communication or business matters that require my input as the majority partner. It's a purely professional relationship with no personal contact whatsoever. One particularly satisfying moment came about 8 months after our split. I was having lunch with a colleague when his business partner joined us, a woman who ran a small business incubator program for the local university. Marcus has got a really good eye for viable business concepts, my colleague told her during our conversation. You should pick his brains sometime about retail strategy. Actually, we're looking for mentors for our new cohort of student entrepreneurs, she replied, handing me her business card. We specifically need people with real-world experience funding and launching successful retail concepts. Would you be interested in participating? I agreed to meet with some of her students and ended up really enjoying the mentoring experience. I never mentioned Luna or Retro Perspective during any of the sessions. I just shared practical advice about business fundamentals, the importance of avoiding social media vanity metrics, and the crucial difference between substance and style in building a sustainable business. It was exactly the kind of advice that Luna had once valued and implemented, back before Instagram likes became her primary measure of success and personal worth. The engagement ring still sits in my safe deposit box at the bank. I keep it there not as some kind of sentimental memento of what we once had, but as a tangible reminder of an important life lesson I learned the hard way. When someone shows you who they really are, you need to believe them the first time, no matter how much you want to believe otherwise. I've genuinely moved on with my life since then. I got a significant promotion at work that came with both increased responsibilities and much better compensation. I started dating someone new who actually understands the fundamental difference between being supportive of your partner's goals and being treated like a human wallet. Someone who genuinely values the idea of building something meaningful together, rather than just looking the part for social media appearances. The last thing I heard through our mutual friend network was that Luna was trying to sell some of the boutique's excess inventory on Craigslist to cover basic operating expenses. Apparently, the latest shipment of the Future is Female tote bags hadn't exactly flown off the shelves as expected. It turns out that actual customers care significantly more about quality and real value than they do about performative feminism and empty slogans. Luna still posts occasionally on social media about being a female entrepreneur and building her business, but the engagement on her content is a tiny fraction of what it once was during the height of her drama. The algorithm is absolutely merciless when you stop providing the kind of constant drama and controversy that drives engagement. When people stop paying attention to your content, the platform stops showing it to others. Her Instagram stories now feature actual merchandise and business updates instead of inspirational quotes and heavily filtered selfies with motivational captions. I suppose that's progress of a sort, even if it came at a high cost to everyone involved. The whole experience taught me an expensive but genuinely valuable lesson about the crucial difference between investing in someone's legitimate dream and funding someone's delusional fantasy. Those are two completely different things, and I just wish I had known which one I was dealing with before I wrote all those checks. But hey, at least I kept all the receipts, both literally and figuratively. The legal documentation proved invaluable when everything went sideways, and the life lesson about recognizing red flags early will serve me well in future relationships and business partnerships. Looking back now, I can see that there were warning signs I should have paid more attention to. The way Luna started changing her language and priorities after Violet's arrival. How she began dismissing practical business concerns in favor of social media metrics. The gradual shift from we to I when discussing the business we had built together. These weren't subtle changes. I just chose to ignore them because I wanted to believe in the person I thought she was. The most frustrating part wasn't even the money I lost or the damage to my reputation. It was watching someone I genuinely cared about transform into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could convince herself that lies were truth if they served her preferred narrative. But sometimes people show you exactly who they are when they think the stakes are high enough. Luna showed me that she was willing to rewrite history, betray trust, and destroy relationships if it meant maintaining an image that served her ego. That's valuable information to have, even if learning it was painful and expensive. I'm grateful that I learned this lesson now, before we got married and potentially had children together. I'm grateful for the legal documentation that protected my interests when everything fell apart. And I'm especially grateful for the friends and family members who saw through the lies and stood by me when it mattered most. The boutique continues to exist, Luna continues to run it, and I continue to receive my monthly payments according to our legal agreement. It's a business relationship now, nothing more and nothing less. Sometimes, the best outcome is simply cutting your losses and moving forward with the wisdom you've gained from the experience. As for what I'd tell someone else facing a similar situation, document everything, trust your instincts, and remember that someone's potential isn't the same as their character. No matter how much you want to believe in someone, you can't love them into being the person you think they could be. And always keep the receipts.